Afternoon, good evening. It is an afternoon. Okay, so we are going to get the show underway, and we have lots to discuss on a very, very important issue and a theme that is going to implicate all our digital futures, our collective futures, our economic futures, our futures' rights and morality and ethics and safety. I think this kind of bundles it all into one very, very important discussion to have. The good news is that in this week in the last week, we've seen that there's been a determination by a very large number of countries to come together, sign a pact for the future, to transform global governance. And within that initiative has been something that two protagonists who will speak to us have been working very hard to put together is the digital compact that all of us have now embraced and signed on to. And in that compact, I think one of the most important aspects is to harness the potential and provide safe spaces to future generations. And in that sense, child safety and protection is not just a rights and ethical and moral obligation, but it's an economics and national security obligation. We have to keep our future safe, and for this we need to tackle this particular aspect. So without further ado, let me first invite the Under Secretary General, the man who's been leading the charge, Ambassador Amandeep Gill, who's the UNSG Special Envoy for all matters digital. But sir, let me first turn to you for your opening remarks to set the afternoon going.
Thank you very much, Samir, and thank you for accepting to moderate this discussion. And I want to start by acknowledging the presence of Minister Felix Mutati from Zambia. Sweden and Zambia co-led, co-facilitated the work on the Global Digital Compact, and the team led by Renata Tuan was the one in the Secretariat who's made this possible. So if you have congratulations, please direct it to the co-facilitators and to Renata and the small and mighty team. I also want to recognize Minister Paula Ingabire from Rwanda. She's a leader on all things digital, has been so for a while. Thank you, Minister, for being here. Commissioner Julie Grant, you are setting a standard on child safety, child protection in Australia, that we look at that with admiration. And many of our other friends, Biman Kitron, who's done amazing work in UK through the Five Rights Foundation on protection. And of course, our co-hosts, our partners in this event, Kitty, and you'll hear from her shortly, so UNICEF. Be warned, you are going to play the leading role in taking this forward. So, as we step back, you're going to step forward. Just a couple of thoughts in terms of substance. I think what Samir, you mentioned, if you zoom out, there is the pact and the two annexes, and those two annexes are, they come together, and the junction is this discussion. Correct. So the Declaration on Future Generation and the Global Digital Compact. And within the GDC, there is this overall thing. There are 5 areas. So some old, some new. Even on the old issues, the GDC brings new momentum, new ways of doing things, new possibilities of funding. One of the areas about human rights, about protection, digital trust and safety. So there's the emphasis on protection of children and other vulnerable communities. But I think the lens is more than protection, it's also about empowerment. So skills, ability to participate in the digital economy, and a constant look at risk, potential risk, from distraction today, loss of sleep, loss of opportunity for play. I'm sure, Biban, you'll go into that in the panel. So we have a comprehensive vision, and we have now clear action areas. What we need to work on today, going forward, is the kind of multi-stakeholder coalition where governments are there, lead actors, but also private sector. Great to have private sector representatives. Youth, of course, international organizations playing their supportive role, and civil society, without which, both private sector and public sector can't be held accountable. So I just want to end by emphasizing this aspect of accountability, and I'll be happy to sit down and...
No, but I think before you take your seat, let me first invite all of you to congratulate Ambassador Gill for his commitment to making this happen over the last couple of years. I know that. you talk to him, it was only about digital compact. There was nothing else in his life for the last couple of years. So I'm glad we can have you back in our fold and we can discuss other things as well. So thank you, Ambassador Gill, for your service. Let me now invite the person who has been mentioned by you in your speech, Kitty van der Heijden, to come and speak to us from the UNICEF. And let me offer you the mic and let me hear your thoughts, ma'am.
Well, first of all, thanks, Amandeep. You know, it's not been so long that we had a special person at the level of USG, special dedicated to technology. And it was only because of you that we have the Global Compact, of course with Zambia, of course with Sweden, of course with all the member states. But had it not been for you, it wouldn't be here. So to me, you are larger than life. You are a co-warrior in the digital space. And thank you so much for the leadership. And thank you, all of you, for being here. I mean, a few years ago, we would not have been able to assemble a room full of people, important people, high-level people from the business side, from ministers, from the convention side, to talk about digital issues, about risks and opportunities. And I think it's a huge, huge opportunity that we have now to leverage this ecosystem of partners to make real change happen. Because I think what we see is that the pace of change in the digital world is going faster than we ever imagined, but so is the level of uncertainty that we are facing, and particularly children that do not yet have the agency to decide for themselves and that are, as Amandeep said, I would say uniquely vulnerable to the potential for exploitation. And we know that we cannot leave children's future at the chance. Most of the data we have in terms of how digital impacts and influences the lives of young children come from this part of the world, the Western industrialized part of the world. But we just had research done in 12 countries in Southeast Asia and Africa. And I find the results really quite scary, that 20% of children, of internet-using children in these regions, Southeast Asia and Africa, suffer online sexual exploitation and abuse in the past years. 1 in 5. If you translate that to the community of children that we have currently on this planet, you're talking millions of children that could have been protected had we as a global community, as a partnership and an ecosystem of interested partners gotten our act together. That's why the Global Digital Compact is so important, because it finally tries to bring in what I think the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and it's great to have you here with General Comment 25, has tried to do, really to bring in a human rights-based dimension in the digital space, because it hasn't been there. And now finally we have codified it. And I think what is very important in the Global Digital Compact, if we are to bring this to life, because it's not just a piece of paper that's going to gather dust as far as UNICEF is concerned. We do need to bring everybody along. And that means that we're going to hold partners accountable. That means the tech companies that bear a huge responsibility for the typology of digital services that they will provide, but also for how they enable parents, caregivers, and young people to report abuse. And then what will they do when there is abuse? Will they take serious action? And of course we need governments, because governments in the end will have to regulate that space. Unfortunately, technology usually goes much faster than governments regulate, I will say. But still, what governments do, with all due respect, and I've been a government official myself, that just isn't good enough, because the internet doesn't abide by borders. So even if one country has excellent legislation, we cannot keep our children safe. It needs to be regulated from an international stance, or child rights will continue to be violated at the level that we have seen. And I quoted the statistic, 1 in 5 children in Africa and Southeast Asia. Just imagine, and this is likely an underreporting of the reality. However, one part I also want to mention is what Amandeep mentioned, that there are opportunities. We tend to see children as victims because their rights are being violated, and that is the reality of their everyday life. But just imagine that we can capacitate the 3.8 billion people we have that are under 30 right now with the digital skills they need, the green skills they need to find employment, to find jobs, to shape the future that we need to see, which is digital and which will be green. And there are programs that we're currently rolling out together with the private sector to make sure that children are also the agents of change that they need to be. So let me end by saying, as Amandeep said, the intergovernmental work is done. The Pact for the Future is over. And if all of you thought that the party could now begin, I am here to tell you the same thing I tell my children every night. It is time to do our homework now, to really get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me now invite four very special people, Minister Paula Ingabire to join me on the top of the room. Let me also invite Julie Inman Grant, Sean Litton, and Anne Skelton. Can I request all of you to join us on the top of the room, please? Excellent. Amandeep has been very generous. He's given us 20 minutes to have a conversation. And we're going to use it wisely. So let me first start with Minister Ingabire. Minister, we heard about Africa was invoked, Asia was invoked. Global South is counting on the digital. The young in your part of the world, in my part of the world, actually are using this medium to transform lives. So from your perspective as Minister of a very dynamic economy, how are you seeing the needs of young people vis-a-vis the digital medium, what is available online? How's the relationship evolving between the youth and the digital world?
Thank you very much, Samir, and I hope it will be 20 minutes every hour where we talk about this from today going forward. But yeah, I think one thing that we need to recognize, especially in parts of the world like Africa, is that the young people, which is really the largest demographic of the continent, are very much in tune with digital. If anything, they're the ones that are quite exposed. One of the challenges that we're always facing, even when we think about child and protection, we worked with the Five Rights Foundation a few years back to put in place our very first child online protection policy. And what was very clear was that as much as we put in place measures and interventions to make sure we're training and skilling and protecting our children while they're online, we need to do something similar for their parents. Take an example of a rural context where at least kids have the opportunity to go to schools that have internet and they have access to devices. Many times they're more exposed to the digital world than their parents. And so in any case, the parents are not even going to have the right skills and tools to be able to safeguard and protect them when they're using the internet. And so for us, it was important that we have a whole of a system approach in dealing with this and ensuring that when we talk about child online protection, when we talk about digital skilling and digital literacy, it's not just staying with those that are under 30, but we're also empowering their parents, the caretakers, the teachers, everyone that's going to be around them, because you need them to have the same level of knowledge and skills to support these children. But back to your question, they have a strong appetite for digital. They know how to go online, they want to teach themselves, they want to create jobs and opportunities. And as a policymaker in my part of the world, we always feel the pressure because you need to make sure that you have affordable infrastructure in these different parts of the country, especially the rural setting. You must make sure that you have affordable devices because devices are a big challenge. Today, we've only been able to implement 2 smart classrooms per school, but our ambition and our hope is that we can have a device per child. And then it also goes back to what are they doing then when they're online? Because it's not enough to put the infrastructure to give them the devices. It's also important that we put things that are going to make sure that they're accessing meaningful content, they're learning, there's growth. And that's why digital education takes center stage of most of our policies.
And Minister, what is the pattern across the continent where you see very similar demographic emerge, and yet you have differently placed countries in terms of access to digital? So how is the continent working together to offer the youth the opportunity to go online and build new lives using the mediums available?
So a couple of priorities that we're already working on as a continent, and it's good to have Minister Felix also in the audience. One, there's the infrastructure side. How do we ensure that we have reliable broadband connectivity for these young people, whether it's in the schools where they were going to school every day, whether it's youth centers around them, because you need to be able to figure out what are those internet hotspots that you can provide for them. On the device side, what we're doing, and we have a number of countries that have come together, we've been actually working with the UNICEF office to figure out how do you lower the cost of devices. And we want to take a similar approach as they've done with vaccines under Gavi to sort of aggregate what the demand is. So if I have 4 million population of students in my country, maybe in Zambia they have 8, another country has 10. How do we aggregate that demand? And if it's 50 million, working with the UNICEF Innovation Office, we're able to figure out how to lower the cost of devices and think about other partners that are going to bring in place the necessary funding models. But to close that loop, we're still going to need people that are creating the content, that are thinking about creating these measures that protect our children while they're online, because we can't just focus on devices and infrastructure.
I'll come back to you, Minister, in a bit. Let me turn to Julie Inman-Grant, Australian E-Safety Commissioner. She is literally someone who's taken on the Wild West in the digital sector. She's a feared name. I'm just telling you that she's a sheriff when it comes to the digital terrain. So Julie, let me first pose a question to you. Since this panel is discussing what the current landscape is, the now as such, what are your concerns regarding the trends that you see on child safety?
Sure.
And children.
Nobody ever expects the online safety regulator to be the positive one. But I guess what I would say about now is that the only way we're going to safeguard our children in the future is if we learn the lessons from the past and anticipate the harms that are to come. So we have to look on all 3 temporal domains to be effective. And back to Paola's point, the way that we've set ourselves up are in terms of what we call the 4 Ps, in terms of prevention, and that includes a huge evidence base we've been able to develop over 9 years, and education materials for children, for parents, for grandparents, for carers, for schools, for teachers, for everyone. Protection comes with our complaint schemes, and that's why I'll talk about the trends that we're seeing now, as well as systemic powers. And then the proactive and systemic change is through shifting the burden onto the industry to assess risks, understand harms, and embed the safety protections at the front end rather than retrofitting after the harm has been done. Safety by design, but also international engagement and anticipating tech trends and challenges, like we did in 2020 with deep fakes, and could not get anyone in the media to pick it up. But we predicted exactly what is happening now. At that time, it took a lot of computing power, about 1,000 images of a singular face, which is why celebrities were often used, and quite a bit of technological know-how to create a credible deep fake. Now a teenager, and this is what we're seeing, can create a deep fake by harvesting a social media photo, and it costs them nothing but the cost to the young girl, because 99% of the targets are women and girls, is incalculable and lifelong. So in terms of some of the trends that we're seeing, both through research, but through taking reports from the public for kids who are being cyberbullied, all Australians who are experiencing image-based abuse. I was asked to set up a revenge porn portal. I said, revenge for what? I'm not going to call it that. The lexicon matters. Let's focus on the harm, and so sense image-based abuse, and I think that terminology has taken off. And then adult cyber abuse, pro-terror, and child sexual abuse material. So let's start with cyberbullying, which we've seen a 313% increase of. Typically, girls are bullied more than boys. The average age was 14. But with the COVID pandemic, with parents being much more permissive with technology use, we're starting to see 8 to 9-year-olds reporting serious cyber abuse, and they just don't have the cognitive ability to be able to process what's happening to them or understand. So they're coming younger. We're actually seeing very mercenary and merciless behavior by young people, rape and death threats targeting 14-year-olds. So I've used my end user notice powers, which is basically cease and desist to these young people that I deliver through the schools and the parent community, but it requires them to take down the content, write apologies, and lets them know that they cannot bully with impunity, and I think that's an important deterrent. Persistent targeting, so creating multiple accounts. We call one of these phenomena phoenixing, where a child will set up 60 different accounts to target a specific person. Each time it's taken down, another one will pop up in its place out of the ashes. So that bullying is intersecting, as I said, not only with deepfake image-based abuse, but also with the proliferation of nudification apps. So if you look at some of the nudifying apps that are freely available now, you'll see a description. Just put in any body type and an age, and we'll produce an image of a girl within 5 seconds. So these are largely open source, created by developers. So one of the things that we have pending before Parliament right now are standards to put some more guardrails and safeguards around open source AI apps like this, but also on the platforms and libraries that host them. Many of these platforms and libraries have no terms of service, no reporting mechanisms. So we're seeing deep fakes and synthetic CSAM and bullying and image-based abuse. I'm taking someone to court for creating deep fakes, and you're looking at your watch. So I'll just say that one of our biggest concerns is financial sexual extortion targeting young men. We've seen a 1,400% increase. And this is being driven by organized criminal gangs, and we're actually seeing a high correlation of suicidal ideation and actual suicide because the tactics are so brutal in terms of distress and placing these children or young men in a corner. And the problem is they tend to be between the ages of 16 and 24 when they're considered to be young adults. And we need parents to know that they need to be on this journey, carers, with their children, until their brains are fully formed.
So I have another question for you, but I'm going to bring it up after I've spoken to Sean, and then I'm going to come back to you. Because Sean is the Executive Director of the Tech Coalition and focusing on our industry-wide response to some of the issues both of you have raised in this early part of this conversation. And my question to him would be, how is the industry working together and across platforms and across mediums in affording, or rather in enabling safe spaces for children online?
Yeah, thank you, Samir, and thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you. So for those of you who don't know, the Tech Coalition is an alliance of 45 major tech companies that have come together solely for the purpose of combating online child sexual exploitation and abuse. We do things like facilitate the development and implementation of new technologies to combat online child sexual exploitation and abuse, facilitate knowledge sharing between our members, so larger, more experienced companies can share what they've learned with new or smaller companies. We invest in research. We try to drive transparency and accountability for our members. And also, we try to facilitate constructive engagement with external stakeholders. I'll just give you a couple examples. In terms of technology, last year we launched a new project called Lantern, which is a signal sharing initiative between about 22 companies. And this initiative is open to not just our members, but any tech company, and it's free of charge. And what Lantern does is if one company, for example, detects an instance of financial sextortion or someone trying to share or sell CSAM or bullying or nudification apps, that they can take action according to their terms of service, report out to law enforcement as required by law, but then share signals both about the content and the perpetrator of the abuse with other companies in a safe, secure, responsible way that honors human rights. And that allows other companies who would otherwise be flying blind, because typically a perpetrator may meet a child on one platform and move them to another platform, and then even a third platform in the process of trying to facilitate their abuse. So these companies now have the ability to see what's going on other platforms and check if that same activity is going on their platform. Just in the pilot phase, Lantern enabled companies to disable 30,000 accounts that would not have been detected absent the signal sharing. So that's 30,000 bad users that have been removed. That's just the pilot. I'll have more information later this year as we finish our first full year. Additionally, we're now reaching out to the financial industry to get them to participate. We have a pilot going with them so that they can ingest some of these signals, because there's often a financial component in some of these crimes involving children online. In addition to the technology, in terms of engaging with multi-stakeholders, two things that Julie mentioned, generative AI. We've been doing a series of briefings with governments and law enforcement by locality. So we've had one in the United States, one in the UK, next is the EU in November, trying to understand kind of what challenges AI-generated material is bringing to these agencies, and how industry can cooperate with them to address those challenges. And for example, with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, out of our briefing in the US, two action items. One was, can we change the reporting template so companies can indicate whether they are aware that the material that they're reporting is AI generated? And secondly, for industry to go back, there's a set of industry standards that companies use to sort of classify CSAM, and to include a special classification for AI-generated CSAM. So those are just a few examples.
So Sean, I want to pose a question to both Julie and to you. One is that what is the industry shift, the industry-wide shift that we are witnessing today? And I want to focus on safety by design, the term that you used at the very beginning, and Paul, I'm going to come back to you as well on this particular question. Are we seeing safety by design now in thick as you produce applications, products, and offerings? And that's the first question I'm asking. And second, have you learned something else from the pandemic? Test and see the impact of what you put out into the public. So are we seeing testing and sandboxes? We were talking about sandboxes a couple of years ago. How is that debate progressed? Are we seeing test and verify and test the integrity of products before we put it out?
Can I just say that the Project Lantern with the Technology Coalition is so welcomed, because we see exactly the same thing. We see perpetrators that continue to jump from platform to platform. So with financial sexual extortion, they're often meeting on Instagram or Snap, or moved over to Snap because of its ephemeral nature, or to a video conferencing platform. So sharing these signals is important. I think the next thing the industry really needs to do is tackle recidivism. So we've sent intelligence reports to a couple of platforms showing that the same image of an attractive blonde is being used 10,000 times in fake imposter accounts. We've shared the kill chain, or the attack vectors, and the scripts that are used. They're all the same. There's a manifesto on how to be successful at sexual extortion that we've also seen that continues to be updated. So we do need companies to do a little bit more. I'm really pleased to see the progress and the acceptance of safety by design. It's been a 15-year journey for me, 6 years as the regulator, and we decided that this was going to be something that we would do with industry rather than do them, and that's why we consulted for about 18 months with 180 different organizations. I feel like I birthed a child and I helped it grow up, and now it's going off to college or university. So we're starting to see safety by design kind of going off in different ways. I think it was Thorne and Alltech is Human have taken a slightly different approach to safety by design in terms of generative AI. And of course, safety by design applies to absolutely everything. And I remember saying to a couple of executives about the metaverse, well, we're just trying to figure out how we get the interoperability and how to monetize this, Julie. We'll think about the privacy and the safety later. And I said, well, okay, if you're building a city in a desert, if you look at urban design principles, of course, urban design, it means you're building cities to last. But you're thinking about where the green spaces are and where the water sources are and where you're going to put the sewage and the bullards and the lights. It's not safety, and creating a pleasant place to live is not an afterthought. And so we need more of that same mentality in terms of technology development beyond the shiny next thing. Because we saw the AI drag race in March and April of last year. So we haven't seen the end of moving fast and breaking things. It was all about achieving first mover status.
Sean?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's progress, and there's progress yet to be made. I'll just give one example. So on generative AI, so roughly 15 months ago, we have several AI platforms within the coalition, and they came together to develop common risk assessment. So what are the risks that that generative AI brings to the table? They then developed a common set of mitigations. So what you get is, instead of one company sitting there trying to figure out by themselves and assess the risk and de-risk their platform, you have multiple platforms sharing it from different perspectives, large, medium, and small. And therefore, coming out of the gate, these companies come with a safer product to market. They then created a resource based on those conversations, and that's available for also new companies that come into the coalition.
And Skelton, Chairperson, UN Committee on the Rights of Child. How can state parties implement the convention? Now, we've seen opportunities, risks, trends, and the fact that we've all signed. How do state parties implement it in your view?
Well, actually, not all states have ratified the convention. The United States of America hasn't, so that would be a good start. But what I was thinking as you were talking, all of you were talking, was the fact that, of course, the Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted by the General Assembly in 1989. Mm-hmm. It's 35 years ago, and I believe it is the same year that the Internet became a thing. And so, of course, there's nothing in the Convention on the Rights of the Child that tells us how we would work with or navigate this. But because the committee views the convention as a living document, we continue to add to it and grow it through general comments. And that's why 3 years ago, the general comment number 25 on children's rights in the digital environment was concluded, and we did that with the help of 5 rights, and we would not have been able to do it without them. Because one of the problems for the children's rights sector is that we risk sounding and being increasingly clunky in this very fast developing world. I haven't often been on a panel with this set of experts, for example. It's something new for us. We all have to learn each other's language and each other's way of thinking and each other's reality. So that's itself, I think, a challenging space. But coming back to what states need to do. The other day, I was with a group of children who very seriously told me that, in their view, Wi-Fi is more important than food. And this, I think, tells us how states are going to be driven by consumer demand, or are already driven by consumer demand, to be providing, to close that digital divide and to make sure that children do have access. And a lot of the things that we might consider to be the problems, like, they're spending all their time on their smartphones, they feel that their smartphones are essential to their lives and a solution to most of the problems that they experience. So it's kind of like, how do we navigate that? The committee recently, and another thing is that already, since the General Comment 25, there is a paragraph that talks about AI, but only one paragraph. And look where we are now. The committee just had a briefing on AI at this last session. And what struck me is that there are so many things to think about. There are the usual risks and concerns, and I think Julie's been, framing all of those here for us. But there are some others as well, aren't there? The risk of children losing their imagination, and children losing their ability to make friendships and to date and just live normal lives without technology being a constant, central point in their lives. And another thing that I noticed when we were having this briefing was the amount of surveillance that is going to come. that is going to occur with all of this. And that's a risk we don't talk about so much. In other words, we see all the risks that children navigating these spaces will come across because there are individuals that want to abuse them. But what about the states themselves? Seeing this as a big opportunity to put in a huge wedge of surveillance on everyone's lives, including children's. And then how do we ever come out from under that? So I think there's an awful lot that we are going to have to think about. And the other issue is that because children are such huge consumers, there's also a risk of them being instrumentalized. And I think this is something that the tech companies have to also think about, that children are consumers. That's true. That's a reality we have to face, but we also have to think beyond that. And so we will, of course, as a committee, be asking states to show us what they've done, both to close the digital divide and to build an inclusive environment, but we'll also be asking them how are they making that safe and secure. But we should also be asking them, and how are they doing that while still allowing freedom of expression, the ability for children to protest, using online platforms. It's going to be a very difficult balance to get. And I think it brings us back to actually something that is an old tension in children's rights, and that is trying to get the balance right between protection and the promotion of autonomy, and that as children grow and mature, we have to give them more space as well. And there are also, besides the real offensive things that young people are doing online, they're also doing a lot of things that are just normal for them, but that can get them into trouble, because very often when states want to regulate, they go punitive. And when they go punitive, they're thinking of adults doing these things rather than adolescents or children doing these things. And so, material that would be sexual abuse material if it was generated by an adult and shown to a child, but if it's generated by an adolescent and shown to another adolescent in a consensual relationship, wouldn't be an offense. But if it's then shared with a third person, it is an offense. So it's very, very complex. So I think the committee is going to have to keep up with the curve and to try to understand this very, very rapidly moving environment and to try and make sense out of what we've got to ask states to do.
Minister, I'm going to give you a final word on both industry as well as the responsibility of the parties, the state parties.
So I think, as she rightly said, it's a complex challenge, but at the same time, it's one that requires this kind of multi-stakeholder dialogue. And I think who we're missing at the table is these children themselves, so that we understand how they think and how we can work together. Because all the efforts, whether it's from the regulatory side, policy, the industry, and everyone, what we're trying to do is to protect kids and make sure that they're thriving in the digital economy. But I think it's also important to understand how can we do that with them? Because we can't create a future for them that they're not a part of creating. Otherwise, there will always be a disconnect between what we're trying to do and what they think is best, and sort of figuring out what's a middle ground between these two worlds.
So it's not only about changing the grammar so that we can understand each other, but also changing the way we speak and engage with those who we seek to empower and protect. I think that's also something that we really need to be thinking about as we move ahead. Please join me in applauding this panel for their intervention. And let me invite you to take your seats. Thank you so much. Let me now actually hear from someone who we have been seeking to protect and empower through many of these conversations. On your reflections, let me invite Alaine Perdomo to the top of the room to give your reflections on what you've heard and perhaps what you've been reading on this matter. So, Alaine, please.
Protecting our children in the digital age. This week has underscored the incredible power of international collaboration and the richness of diverse perspectives. It is through our shared experiences and ideas spanning generations, cultures, and professions that we can forge meaningful solutions and challenges we face. As a young girl from Belize, I had 17 years to witness my friends, my family, my peers, the citizens of my country, our world, experience the effects of a lack of digital protection. Today, I'll speak of just one. Let me introduce you to Maria, a 14-year-old girl from Toledo, a rural area in Belize. Her father works tirelessly as a farmer, while her mother takes care of their home. After months of hard work, they have finally saved enough money to buy Maria a second-hand phone from her neighbor. This is aimed to evade the vulnerability faced by many Belizeans as they risk their protection for hour-long journeys to schools. On her 14th birthday, Maria's excitement is palpable as she unwraps the phone, and it represents freedom, connection, and also a world of possibilities she is eager to explore. But as she quickly embraces social media, she begins sharing pictures of herself, engaging with friends online, and like many young girls, looking up to other influencers, just wanting to fit in. But soon her joy is overshadowed by sinister encounters. A stranger, posing as a boy her age, begins messaging her. At first, he seems friendly. He likes the same movies as her, reads the same books, shares the same interests, but it quickly escalates. He asks for her number, where she lives, wants to meet, requests pictures, and then with increasing intensity sends messages that Maria doesn't want to receive. But in wanting to escape this scenario, she finds that she can't. Her information is shared, he begins calling her school, the people she knows, and she feels trapped. Maria's story is a reminder of the dangers children face online, a reality shared by millions across the globe. 1 in 4 children experience some form of online abuse before they turn 18. 36% of young people report having encountered harmful content online, from bullying to sexual exploitation. These numbers are not just statistics. They represent the lives of real children, children whose innocence is shattered and whose trust is betrayed. In Belize, the risks are even more pronounced due to the interplay of various social and infrastructural factors. Limited access to technology and the internet exacerbate the digital divide, leaving many children in rural areas like Toledo especially vulnerable. Internet access in rural Belize is significantly lower than in urban areas, restricting opportunities for education and safe online engagement. This lack of connectivity not only impedes children's ability to access educational resources, but also limits their understanding of digital safety. The issue of digital literacy in Belize is critical. Children in low-income regions lack the digital literacy skills to identify threats online, leaving them unprepared to protect themselves. The absence of comprehensive school-based education programs focusing on internet safety further amplifies this problem. While some initiatives have been implemented, many schools lack the resources and training necessary to effectively educate students about the potential dangers of online interactions and how to navigate them safely. Additionally, there's the fact of cultural context in Belize that can contribute to the underreporting of online abuse in communities where discussing issues of abuse and exploitation is stigmatized. Children may feel reluctant to seek help or report incidents. Building trust and creating a safe space for children to voice their concerns is vital in ensuring their protection. Sadly, the current strategies we have in place to safeguard our children are inadequate, especially in developing regions. Educational programs designed to teach digital literacy often lack depth, relevance, and accessibility. In many communities, these initiatives are reactive rather than proactive, addressing issues only after they arise. This leaves children vulnerable to the devastating impacts of cyberbullying and exploitation. For many families in low-income areas, limited access to technology and the internet exacerbate the situation, creating a digital divide that leaves children ill-equipped to navigate the online world safely. They deserve more than this. They deserve the tools to thrive. Moreover, the inadequate responses of social media platforms and tech companies further endanger our children. Often, profit margins take precedence over child safety, resulting in weak content moderation and ineffective reporting mechanisms, especially for children. When harmful content slips through the cracks, the consequences can be catastrophic for young users. Compounding this issue is outdated legal framework in many developing countries, which fails to hold these companies accountable for their negligence. It is a profound betrayal of the trust placed in them, and we must demand better. So how do we combat these pressing issues and protect our children? We must adopt bold, innovative strategies that adapt to the unique challenges faced in developing countries. First, we need to revolutionize our educational initiatives. Programs that empower children and parents with the knowledge and skills to navigate the online world safely. These initiatives must include engaging real-world applications that resonate with these young people, fostering resilience and confidence in their ability to stand against cyberbullying and exploitation. We must also advocate for stronger regulations that hold tech companies accountable for their actions. This means pushing for laws that require platforms to implement robust content moderating systems, ensuring the safety of young users. Our children should be able to explore the internet freely, without the constant fear of exposure to harmful content. Investing in technology that actively protects children online is also essential. We need advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to detect and filter harmful content in real time. Developing secure, user-friendly reporting systems will empower children to report abuse anonymously and without fear. This creates a culture of safety and vigilance among young users, allowing them to navigate the digital landscape confidently. As well as international collaboration is vital in this fight. As a global community, we must unite to share best practices and resources, creating a unified front against online exploitation. By establishing international standards for child protection, we can ensure that every child, regardless of where they live, benefits from robust safety measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Alaine. We're going to get you back after the next segment as well to have your final thoughts. But let me now invite Baroness Beeben. Let me invite Najat Mullah Majid, Courtney Gregoire, and Olaf Skoog to join me at the top of the room to discuss what can be done next, the future. And please. And we again have 20 minutes, so we are going to straight get to those conversations. Let me first start with Baroness Beeben. As looking ahead, what is the greatest risk and opportunity in the future, into the future, Baroness, as we especially focus on this particular aspect of empowerment and protection at the same time?
Okay, just before I go to the future, I just want to say it's very rare that I get to sit up and I've agreed with every single speaker who's gone before me. In fact, it may be a first, so, you know. So if what comes next is as seamless as what has just gone on, we're in good hands. And I do actually also want to give my personal thanks to Amandeep and Renata and the team and everyone for this work. It has been difficult and incredible. So, now, I'm not gifted with the sight of everything that's going to come next, but I wanted to just raise 3 points. And I'm going to start with saying that lawmakers and regulators have been really slow to understand it's the machine and not the content. And I have to say Julie is an exception to that. But one of the problems that we have to solve now into the future is to understand it is the machine and not the content primarily. And I want to give you an example. On Wikipedia is every horrible thing known to humanity. But when you go there, you're not pulled in. When you are there, you're not pushed to stay. You're not given something worse and next. And you're not then, when you leave, asked to come back. And it is those mechanisms of pushing, and shoving and entrapping that are most difficult for children. So I think leading from what Julie says, leading from the age-appropriate design code in the UK, leading from some of the legislation we're seeing out of EU, we have to take a by design approach. We have to take a privacy by design approach, because that's what drives those functionalities. The second thing I really wanted to say is that this leap in AI functionality, which I think we could have anticipated and perhaps didn't quite, some of the things, again, that Julie's raised, deepfakes, AI, CSAM, and so on, I think we must understand for children who do not have another lived experience and do use their devices and cannot imagine other ways of communicating, the degradation of the information system, the not understanding what is real and what is imagined, and, if I might say so, the fact that, that things can get as bad as the human imagination, that defy gravity and reality, yeah, this is a big problem. Because children are increasingly, and we work a lot with children at Five Rights, very directly, and they're increasingly talking about their fear of not understanding the world they live in. So that is another thing that we have to tackle, and we have to tackle it sensitively and properly, but robustly. Which brings me to my third and final point, which is rather more optimistic, which is that last week I was in Oxford and some young people came and showed me their AI products. The first young boy had developed something where he could photograph a vine and say whether it was ready to pick. And he managed on his farm, on the family farm, to increase the harvest by a third. 15 years old, right? The second young boy, also 15, had worked out the spills at sea and where the tides were going, and was arranging pickups of rubbish on the right beach, because there the rubbish went, according to the tide, to the beach, and there they were to pick up the rubbish. And the third group were a group of 14-year-old girls, 3 of them, who created a personalized service to teach sign language in their school because one of their classmates was deaf. Now, I want to say that when I was 10 years old, I couldn't speak for a year because I had an operation on my throat. And I would have liked an app that taught everyone in my class to speak sign language. So what I want to say is, as ever, we have to think about it as uses and abuses, and we have to think about it by design ahead of rolling out products. I can see you want me to stop.
No, I was just stunned that I was just stunned that someone in Oxford could know anything about wine. So that's something that really surprised me. But Oxford plus AI, you get good wine. So that's a formula. But But thank you so much for both that note of optimism on why we have to protect this space. I think that's the motivation in some ways for why we are doing the rest, right? Olaf, as the EU representative for human rights, under your mandate, in your charge, how are you going to further promote protection and the rights of children in the digital age, based on what we just heard and done this week in the UN?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. This is I've been to many panels this last few days, but this is one that I wish I didn't have to speak, but rather just listen, because it's been so instructive for me, just hearing what's been said so far. It's reminded about, I used to be the Swedish ambassador here, and occasionally the Swedish Queen would appear at events that were about child safety and protection against sexual abuse. And I remember one was about the digital sphere, and everyone was saying their piece, everyone agreed about the dangers and the risks and whatnot, but the telecommunications industry also were all in favor of this, etc. But the Queen she wasn't satisfied. So she said, well, if you're so committed, why don't you develop an application in every cell phone that just explains the Convention of the Right to the Child, so that each child will know what their rights are. And it's just struck me now because we're talking about, and I really want to congratulate everyone on the convention, on the digital compact. I always understood that to be a twofold ambition. One is to bridge the divide, and the other one to do it in a way that is safe. And I thought the two interventions before from Australia and Rwanda spoke to the two dimensions of this. And, you know, somehow I think we've come too far away from understanding this from a human rights perspective. Human rights are universal. They are a right of every people, child, girl, whatever, in the whole world. And they apply equally in offline as they do online. And somehow, because the technology makes this difficult to apply, we come to the sort of the notion that there are different rules here, because technology has advanced, etc. So I really think we need to catch up on the regulatory basis, and that's what we're trying to do. In the EU, and sometimes we're accused of being too intrusive and whatnot, but I do think we found models that do try precisely to strike the right balance between freedom of expression, etc., but also for protection. So I think what we can do as the European Union is to help countries build the soft power, the affordable digital connectivity, etc., for everyone, but in a much better way than we did ourselves as we started this, one that really protects children. I think that could be our greatest contribution, and possibly to keep having this conversation with the private sector and the platforms. When I grew up, this is old school, when you opened the newspaper, there was a responsible publisher. Every content in the paper, there's someone to hold to account about the contents. We have to come back to that same notion when it comes to the internet and now to the AI. Thank you very much.
Nadat, Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children. What would your recommendations be to member states? Observations, recommendations on protecting children from violence in the digital environment, and of course the mutually reinforcing nature of violence and participation, right? So in that sense, what would your recommendations be?
I think Alaine, if it's a good name if I'm pronouncing, did it very well, to be very frank, and many people did it before. And you know, I was involved also, thanks to Amandeep, in all this process. And I am meeting many people that we are repeating. So the question is, for me, if I have concrete recommendation, because I think what is important when I am visiting a lot of countries, and we have also to be very context specific. And the issue is, yes, in the same time, yes, access to really digital learning, digital, empowerment has to be. And it's not an easy task, as you highlighted. And it's not only about connection, it's about devices, it's about content, it is about also the teacher, it's about those who are going to coach, to counsel. This is more wider than that. This is regarding the cooperation of the European Union towards, it's not only about that, it's more wider than that. The other issue, I think that you highlight very well, it's also what I am saying, if I have a recommendation, violence against children online, exploitation online is not only one form. You have huge. We are focusing on child sexual abuse material. And yes, it's true. But we have no clue regarding, or no idea about, promotion of hate speech, suicide, self-harm, theft of identity, gaming, gambling, it's amazing. Enrollment in radicalization, the list is very long. So I think we need also to make sure that we are dealing with that. This is important also to see protection in a wider spectrum. The other point that is important is also the continuum between violence online and offline. And in many countries, you have program online, policies for violence protection online, and another one, for other forms. This continuum has to be, because it can start online. And another main point that is important that countries are facing, and I am really reflecting about what I am seeing, is all the cyber and peer bullying. And this is a big issue because they are children, as you highlight, and at the same time they are harming. You have the bulliers, the bystanders, you have those who are bullying. So, and there is no bad and good children, so there is no bad children, but how we can deal. And when you are discussing teachers, parents, Police didn't know how to deal if it's crime or not. Another point is it's a wonderful tool for expression, freedom of expression. But sorry, you have many children who are arrested because they are, expressing themselves. And the most important thing is currently regarding, if I have a recommendation, yes, we need strong regulation, we need control, we need monitoring, we need to make sure that it's embedded. But at the same time, as you highlighted, all of us, we need to support because we are always lagging behind. So why we are so sorry? I was special rapporteur many years ago, and we are repeating the same thing. What means child safety by design and child privacy by design? Why we are not able to make sure that we have mandatory regulation and accountability? And this, we have a big issue. But I just want to add a point regarding child participation. I think it's really important also, and we did with thousands of children, and with Tech Coalition, with Child Helpline, assessing, also the services online, because it's also a wonderful tool to inform, to provide child protection online, to make reporting online. And we assess all that, from the, the background and the perspective of children. When children have a problem, the first things they turn to is internet and all things online. The other thing, we did a mapping of wonderful, as you just highlighted in the beginning, Baroness, the number of peer initiatives done by children themselves, really to protect, to counter, cyberbullying. It's amazing. And I think having them on board without putting the burden on their shoulders, because they have not the responsibility to respond to all, really to make sure that they are on board, not only when we are designing, but to listen to them. I saw wonderful example regarding cyberbullying that were dealt better by children and young people than by others. I just want to add one thing because I am seeing you. When we are speaking about protection and also about all this image and currently the mix between virtual and real image, the problem is that they never disappear. And this is a big issue. And sorry, this is a responsibility not only of the government, but also of the ICT sector. So these are some points.
No, thank you so much. And I guess, Courtney, we'll come to you, and you've heard a lot through the last two panels. I want a Microsoft Vice President perspective, someone who's the Chief Digital Safety Officer, multiple years of working on this.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I have to echo thank you. Thank you, UNICEF, the Special Envoy, for bringing together this important conversation. I'm actually going to do the right thing here and quote Commissioner Julian McGrant to open my thoughts. She's the one who put it on the table. We have to be honest with ourselves. The internet was not built for children. And we are at that moment in time where we need to rebuild what we've already built and take all these lessons learned to design emerging technology, thinking of this top of mind. From a Microsoft perspective, we have the goal of empowering young people to use technology safely, mindfully, in pursuit of social, economic, and educational opportunities. In keeping with those commitments, what we need to do is we need to build a bridge over the digital divide, unlock the power of technology for all, maintain our commitments to advancing child online safety and privacy, and advance how technology and the well-being of children actually interact. So I actually have three themes, and they really sound a lot like yours. First, let's be honest. I'm sorry, I'm from tech. We are in 1.0 of the regulatory landscape about protecting children. You said it well. It's focused on content and conduct, and that was important. But it's really done through the lens of risk, and we see that fragmented globally as a technology company. It's very similar in the data protection space. And let's be perfectly honest, those two frameworks do not interact very well. So we have an opportunity, and the Global Digital Compact puts it on the table, to think about what it means from a regulatory perspective to build a framework that actually is holistic in nature, thinking about the entire rights of the child. Second, we need to advance our evidence base. I'm looking at a room of experts who do this on a day-to-day basis, but you focused a lot on social media. And there's new technology coming out. And we need an evidence base that helps empower how we build this next generation of technology to really think about what young people want. Third, and we've all talked about it, I am so thankful and optimistic because we have much more deeply had the conversations we need to have with young people about what they actually want, with parents about what they actually want. So let's get realistic about that. There are some artificial timelines at age 13 and 18 in the online environment. That is sure not how my children are developing. We need to respect that and figure out the frameworks to enable that empowerment that we bring along the journey. And you know what the most fun part of my job gets to be? Meeting children where they are as we build them on this bridge. One of the best tools that we should have thought a long time ago, Minecraft for good gaming. Guess what? Children want to learn how to be a good digital citizenship while they're actually playing a game. And that is incredibly important and powerful. How do we reward those that are taking seriously digital citizenship and being the best peer advocate? Because to be perfectly honest, I'd hope they're talking to their peers, ideally before they talk to a chatbot, but we know they're going to do it before they talk to their parents. So thank you for what you do and how we build that community to be able to talk and build that together. I had a similar experience that you did recently. I had the opportunity to go to Singapore and award a couple laptops to students who'd taken seriously our challenge, how do you use AI responsibly? And what we told them, build a tool that's going to solve a societal problem, and then tell us what the challenges are with it and how we should be thinking about that as a community. The most compelling to me right now was a young woman, 13 years old, came with a chat app that was going to enable her to better communicate with her grandfather who was suffering dementia. She thought it could be a model for others. But then she stood up there and said, as long as this app does not harvest too much health technology information, privacy information, that it isn't going to be weaponized for anyone in my family, then I know this technology can help change the world. We have that opportunity to do that with them, but we got to build it together. So the last plea is it's best when it's a multi-stakeholder conversation. We commit to being a good partner. Sean leads the Technology Coalition to being honest about what the technological capabilities are, but we do it best when it's informed from the voices of young people and those who really understand the mental, physical well-being and opportunities.
Thank you, Courtney. Baroness, I'm going to turn back to you.
Yeah, I think I welcome all stakeholders doing absolutely everything. And actually, if we were going to leave the future in the hands of children to develop our new media and our new communications tool, I'd be really comfortable. Unfortunately, they're in the hands of business. And I think until we actually say, A, there is a commitment to be age appropriate, and I mean age appropriate, evolving capacity. Thank you, Anne, for mentioning General Comment 25. That puts it right at the heart. And also, for it not to be extractive, yeah, then until that moment, we don't have a hope of having age-appropriate tools. The second thing that I want to say, which, you know, I think you probably agree with me, but the tech companies hold their information tight. And so people in this room who come from academia or from the third sector cannot get the data that they need to really make the proof points to move governments at scale. And I do think we've been failed by the political class, and I speak as someone who is a legislator, and I've done my damnedest to make sure that we make the progress we can be. But I would urge everyone to see this as a global problem and to mirror best practice. I steal from Julie all the time. Other people steal from what I do. And I have worked with many people around in this room and outside this room, Singapore, Indonesia, Brazil. We do not need this to be protections in the connected world. And as Paula said, you know, be panicking about how to get on, but then not to consider how children in Rwanda get on safely. So I really do congratulate Rwanda for putting their child online safety in ahead of their getting online. You know, so these are really serious political points that have to be mandatory. Let's not pretend.
And like someone said, maybe it's time to have regulation that stipulates certain behavior, right? I think that's also something we need to think about. So please join me in applauding this panel for their inputs. And you can, of course, take your seats. So we are now going to take some comments from all of you, some thoughts and some reflections on what we've come, and I'm just going to come to you, but let me first start with a colleague from Netherlands, and let me request each one of you brief introduction, and keep your comments brief and short, and maybe if you want it to be directed to a particular theme, please do that, and we will try and take as many as possible. So let's start with you, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Jonine de Waal, and I'm Director for Digitalization and Public Service in the Netherlands. Well, the panelists today have reminded us of some of the online harms that have to be at front of mind for policymakers and tech companies alike. Because aside from protecting our children from harm, we have to enable them to use the online tools for positive enjoyment and to reach their full potential. In the Netherlands, we've taken a number of action in this regard, both through the European Union's Better Internet for Kids strategy and nationally, such as developing a children's rights assessment, commissioning an age-appropriate design code, and especially in seeking to foster partnerships around the development of effective but also rights-respecting age verification online. And Courtney mentioned that child protection and data protection frameworks don't fit well together, which poses unique challenges in particular in relation to data protection. So I was wondering if Courtney or someone else from the panel could perhaps reflect on the possibilities to balance those protections while installing effective age verification.
So this is now a tag. You've tagged Courtney, but I'm going to come to Courtney a bit later. I'm going to take a few more comments, but thank you for your reflections, right? I have a few hands there, and I want to go to them, and then Courtney, we'll try to squeeze you in. A 1-minute response. Yeah, this for you.
Thank you very much. My name is Rebecca McKinnon. I'm with the Wikimedia Foundation. I appreciate Baroness Kidron's comment about Wikipedia. Just to perhaps add to what you said, given that Wikipedia aspires to contain the sum of all knowledge and to enable and empower everyone everywhere to share the sum of all knowledge. Of course, all human knowledge includes terrible things, but also includes the most wonderful things and everything in between. But the point being is that there are rules around having neutral, well-sourced, encyclopedic educational content so that people can understand the facts about the terrible things as well as the wonderful things and other things in between. So I just wanted to clarify, but to come to the point, I really appreciated what you said about the systems. It's not just about the content, it's about the business model and how content, how the technology may be targeting people or amplifying and so on, and the extent to which platform is taking responsibility. I appreciated what was said about human rights. I'd like to tie this to the Global Digital Compact, just in one moment. The Global Digital Compact talks about digital public goods. And this brings me to the minister from Rwanda and the importance of creating a world that young people are helping to create, that's not just being imposed upon them, and the empowerment piece. And I would love to hear any comments or thoughts that people might have about the importance of empowering young people in the creation and maintenance and governance of digital public goods and being part of the multi-stakeholder processes that will enable us to build a future that young people feel welcome in, empowered, and having their rights protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's so good to see you after a very long time. Okay, so let's come to you. I'm going to come see you, actually. But let's keep it short so that there are lots of hands. So thank you for your interest. But if you can be brief, I can come to lots of you, right?
Thank you so much. I'm Tobegle Matimbe. I'm Senior Manager Partnerships and Engagements at Paradigm Initiative. And we are working on the African continent, promoting digital inclusion. And we also upload and welcome the adoption of the GDC. But in this context of this conversation, I think we are more concerned about the policy and legislative landscape in Africa, because what we're saying is that the development of online safety policies for children, it's at a very sluggish rate, and that is particularly concerning. So even having heard the perspective from the Rwanda minister, that's just one small example of what's happening on the African continent, and I would like to just, I think, continue to urge that there's need for agency with regards to development of policy, especially online child safety policies.
Thank you for making that point. And can I come to the lady here, and I'll come to you. I'm just coming to you.
Thank you so much for this. Mine is really a personal story, but also appreciation of the panel today. So I'm a computer engineer and an AI specialist. I'm a consultant. My name is Peace Kutesa. I'm also a co-founder of a social enterprise in Uganda that teaches women how to use IT for their small businesses. Why this is important for me is that having run my company for the last 10 years, my children were educated about the internet, both the potential and also the dangers. Unfortunately for us, during the lockdown, I gave my children phones. They were 10 and 12. They were victims of sexual predators. And it shocked me because I thought we had had a conversation before. So knowing that somebody is standing up for these children and insisting that there are policies that monitor social media, but also gaming, because this started from Roblox. And I thought Roblox is safe. Roblox has if somebody is trying to ask for information, it's always like, are you safe? Is everything like after every 2 lines? So it surprised me that these people moved from Roblox to TikTok to, I think, Discuss or something. So having somebody mention that it's possible to monitor activity right from gaming platforms to other conversational and social media is very important to me, and we have to do it. We have to watch for these children, and this is important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I come this side? I'll go to the other side of the room. I've been here. That's for you, and I'll come to you as well. I know you.
Hi, I'm Vaishnavi. I have a question for the panelists as a whole, which is, I'd love to understand how you've seen the relationship between companies, regulators, and civil society evolve over the last 10 to 15 years. I personally, as someone who's been in the industry for a long time, feel like it's a much more productive conversation now than it was, maybe 15 years ago, but I'd love to hear from the panelists themselves.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Gary Fowley. I'm with the International Telecommunication Union, the UN Specialized Agency for Technology. I'm just here to ask for help in updating our guidelines. We did the first Child Online Protection Guidelines in 2009 for children, educators, regulators, industry, and parents. Those were updated in 2020, but now obviously with the GDP and the very good AI report, they need to be updated again, but they're there. There's interactive modules for training for children in 3 different age groups. We'd love your feedback on them. You can find them at www.itu.int.
Thank you. And please do help out and participate. Go ahead. This is the final intervention. Then I'm going to go back.
Thank you very much. Mine is a question and also a challenge to all of us. For the AU, African Union is coming up with an online safety model law. Anybody who wants to get involved, please look for me after this. But my challenge is, Maria did an amazing job. Please follow her. She came up, she analyzed the Global Digital Compact and teased out issues to do with children. Okay? Are we able to come up with a matrix which we are going to hold governments accountable for those promises they have made for children? I'm going to work with my children who I work with. I work with Mtoto News. Mtoto News is a children's digital company based in Nairobi, working across Africa. But because we are guilty, or we are going to be held accountable, everybody in this room, if those promises are not met for children. Amazing, amazing commitments. But can we be able to come up with something? Someone from ITU, Dr. Najat, someone can lead that work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we've had some wonderful. We've had a challenge, we've had a call for assistance, we've had a plea for legislation. We've had wonderful feedback from all of you who've been hearing these discussions. But I think I do want to do justice to what we've heard, and I want to come back to 3 people, and I'm going to time you now because I want to we have a surprise final speech here. So I want to give you all a minute each. Quick responses, Julie, Courtney, and Baroness. on what you heard. And I think all three of you have been probably implicated by. And you want to come in with that, Najat? We'll come to you.
Okay, I'll do a speed round. Mr. ITU, could you get the telcos to say what they're capable of doing and helping this problem? Because I keep hearing from telcos in Australia, we don't have a role, deep packet inspections too expensive, and we can't even share. Do you, as a caring mother, I'm sorry that happened to you, and no space is safe, particularly spaces where children are. And we can be as vigilant as possible, and companies can have protections in place. To me, it's about having open conversations early and often, and being as engaged in our kids' online lives as we are our everyday lives. And it was very hard for many of us during the pandemic when we were trying to do that. I think there's a false binary between privacy and safety. We spent 2 years on an age verification roadmap. I do think we can balance the two. In fact, many issues like image-based abuse are one of the most grievous violations of privacy, but it's also an online harm. And if we protect children's PII, we're protecting their safety. So we need to look at the commonalities as well.
Yeah, I would also double down on the privacy is not the enemy of safety. In fact, it is the core of safety. I just want to say about the relationship with the tech companies, it has changed. They have to talk to us now. They do ring us. They do ask us what we think. They don't always do what we say. So I do think it's changed. But, mandatory, 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 mandatory. I also want to say to you, I'm sorry about your experience, and this is a systemic issue. No one parent, no one mother, no one child can deal with this on their own. And when I'm asked by parents who are desperate, what can I do? I give them the little bits that they can do, but what we must all do is go to implementation. My colleague here from Uganda said, as I walked in the room, it's all about implementation. So whatever your power base, that is the power base that you have to use, whether you have an official position in the EU, which is leading the way, or in fact, if you're a teacher, a counsellor, a regulator, whatever you are, you have to go for compulsory, mandatory rules.
Thank you. Courtney, and then I'll come to you.
This is a difficult speed dating round. One, I agree and wholeheartedly, privacy and safety should go hand in hand. We cannot accept regulatory frameworks forever that are going to prevent the detection of child sexual exploitation and abuse in the name of privacy, and that is happening in some markets around the world. I'm going to state that. Two, multi-stakeholderism is where it's at, and I think it has evolved in a transparent time because those who come to the table with a sense of humility that the tech sector can't solve some challenges that have been around since the dawn of time, the abuse of children. We need to hear and better understand. I do think multi-stakeholderism is being tested right now, though, and I think it's important to continue to invest in it for the real solutions. I want that scorecard, and AI can help build it very quickly to evaluate the Global Digital Compact and then benchmark other countries. That is exactly what AI should be doing for good.
Thank you. And the final word from Najat, you want to come in? The mic, yes.
Very short, because many things were already told. I think what is important is also regarding, it seems that all the internet AI is becoming a new continent. And nobody, to be very frank, and since we arrived, we're speaking about legislation. And you have in Africa, you can have wonderful legislation. The problem is implementation. The problem is the law enforcement. The problem is access to technology. And I have a problem also with the ICT sector more widely, that we are always speaking about, yes, we need safety and privacy by design, but in the same time, the technologies are going on. So why they are stopping at one moment instead of launching and doing it very deeply? So we will avoid, we are always behind. And the issue of empowering children, I think it's important, informing them, having them on board, but in the same time, not to put all the burden, because this has become very easy. And the last thing, I think we have to never forget that it's a big lucrative industry. And this is really important to bear it in mind.
No, I guess that's a wonderful way to end this conversation. I think for me, we've heard some poignant personal stories on harm, and I think that must motivate us to do better as a multi-stakeholder group that's gathered here. But we've also heard the positive implications of having empowerment through digital tools and why it must be something we must pursue for all. And of course, we've heard about the need for industry and participation, better legislation, and a more whole of society approach on responding to these challenges. But to cap this particular conversation, I'm now delighted to invite Minister Felix Motati Mutati. I've been practicing that. Sorry, I still get it wrong. Mr. Mutati to speak to us and close this conversation with his thoughts, his reflections, and especially coming from a continent that's been in the debate for the last 1 hour. So, Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much. And let me say, I was very touched by your story about Maria and what she went through. And I think the key problem that we have, policymakers, politicians, is the composition of what we call stakeholders. When you are formulating policy, we are not including Maria in the formulation of policy. We are not including the kids in formulation of law. And therefore, we're saying we know it all. We're here to tell you what to do. And that, I think, is a lesson that as politicians must be able to learn, that we can't change the lives of the children without them. They need to be part and be on the table for policy formulation. In the case of Zambia, a different situation, what you call delayed access. My government, this government, has been around only for 3 years. And what we said is, let's have access to education, free education for the kids. And in the last 3 years, we have been able to bring 1.6 million kids into school. Now imagine if that 1.6 never walked in that school. But we are talking about abuse would be worse. They will be the criminals of the future and do worse things than what's happening on the internet. It's basically delayed access. We recruited 40,000 teachers, again to deal with the issues of education, free education, including providing meals for the kids to motivate them to come to school. Working with cooperating partners assisting us in infrastructure. So we're starting from the bottom. Delayed access. Delayed access in terms of digital infrastructure, skills, literacy, that we need to attend to. And then we are hit by climate change. Our resource base has collapsed significantly. And that's when we come to the Global Digital Compact, we want partnership, UNICEF and others, that this is our problem together. You can't be safe if your neighbor's house is burning, because trouble will be transferred to you. So we need to come together and say, this is our problem. This is a global problem, and that is why we have a Global Digital Compact. It's all about all of us. Not them, but all of us. We need to make that change. We need to be able to begin to build the legs of Maria to stand up because of good policy that includes a legal framework that includes access that includes them, including the cost of devices, which are predominantly made from the West. Think of the child in Africa who must choose between a pair of shoes and a cell phone. The choices are hard. So as we sit here together and celebrate the Global Digital Compact, let's think of that child, particularly in the Global South, that their needs are urgent, are immense. They want to be part of the globe. Please include them in the things that you do. When you go to sleep tonight, think about them. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you so much. I think that's a call for action for all of us and a good note to end this wonderful afternoon conversation with some very insightful ideas presented to all of us to take back with us. So thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I hope we continue this conversation in the days. Very important one to have.